As you've just heard, I'm Ian Dowds, CEO of UK Online Measurement, or UKOM, a rare four-letter acronym in this world of mostly three-letter acronyms, or TLAs, as I like to call them. Thank you very much to Richard and his team at the AOP for pulling together this brilliant series of publisher tech talks, or PTTs, as they are now known. And we at UKOM are delighted to sponsor this one. Before I introduce you to Sammy Eales of Mail Metro Media, you're not yet known as MMM, are you?
I would refer to myself as
A three-letter acronym, it just becomes a sound.
Yeah.
Let me give you a little bit of context. Now, I suspect you're all desperately looking forward to immersing yourself in the brochure for this event today, and I bet you can't wait to read the brilliant article that I've written in it. But for those few of you who may not get time to read it when it lands in your inbox tomorrow, let me give you a very brief summary of it. The AOP has always been adamant that trusted, transparent and future-ready audience measurement is critical to our industry. And basically, UKOM provides that for the industry. And that's pretty much it. But if I just said that in an entire article, I might as well have just bought a single page ad, and I didn't. I took the time to write an article. So let me give you a little bit more. It's not just the AOP that says we need objective and independent measurement. UKOM's other co-owners also say it. So ISBA, four-letter, ISBA says it. And the IAB says it. It's why the vast majority of quality publishers in the UK subscribe to UKOM-endorsed data from Ipsos Iris. The IPA say it too. Publicis, Dentsu, Havas, the Seven Stars, Good Stuff, among other agencies, also subscribe to UKOM data. So do the BBC. So do Sky. So do ITV. Ofcom subscribes. That's the government regulator of communications. The Competition and Markets Authority subscribes to Ipsos Iris because it's the endorsed data set from UKOM. The CMA, that's the government authority ensuring fair competition for the good of the UK economy. That's serious stuff. So Ipsos Iris, endorsed by UKOM, is the industry standard for online audience measurement. Anyway, in this brilliant article that you're now all going to read tomorrow when it lands, I refer to Mitchell and Webb, a pair of comedians who, back in their 90s sketch show on TV, spoofed a range of TV quiz shows with something called Number Wang, in which contestants took turns to shout out random numbers until one of them hit on that week's secret number wang. And with options ranging from 0 to infinity, the excitement for the audience and the contestants pretty soon wore off, as you can imagine. Well, it was the same in the noughties with online audience numbers. Various providers of site analytics all generating different numbers for different online properties without context or rigor. And it's the reason that UKOM came into being. And while we do our job of governance of the industry standard for online audience measurement, I can't pretend that UKOM has stemmed the flow entirely of unvalidated audience data. It's definitely still out there. The IPA calls it noise. And it's to cut through some of this noise that publishers are understandably starting to turn to first-party data. It makes absolute sense. If data is oil, then surely first-party data is refined petrol or rocket fuel, as opposed to crude oil. It certainly can be, as we've just heard, can be really valuable. The one thing I would say is let's be careful before we all turn to first-party data as the panacea to cure all online measurement ills. It was Facebook's first-party data that gave them the confidence a few years ago to claim an audience of 1624s in the UK that was greater than the actual population of that age in this country. Joe Lewis, who runs Project Origin for Isbar is very open about the fact that a number of broadcaster apps that he subscribes to have him registered as 107 years old and non-binary. And Joe is not 107 years old and he's not non-binary. So data is not a zero-sum game, and UKOM never demands that no other sources than Ipsos Iris are used. That's not the way it works. There are plenty of valid data sets out there. But take nobody's word for that validity, not even your own readers. That's my message for today. You're going to hear a lot more about it, and I'm going to thank you for listening to my brief waffle. I'm going to wish you a fruitful and educational morning, and I'm going to introduce you to the brilliant Sammy Eels of
Well, I'm quite sure. Can you guys see me over this? Yeah, it was fabulous.
I can't when I sit down.
Yes, that's what I thought. I was like, they were able to see me. Fab. So yes, hi, I'm Sammy. I'm a Senior Insight and Data Manager at Mail Metro Media. So I sit in the Commercial Insight team, and now we've merged with the data team as well. So I represent advertising for everywhere from Daily Mail, Metro and I, so the print products, all the way through to Mail Online, Metro.co.uk, iNews, This Is Money, New Scientist, and many other things that we decide to buy. Gets a bit busy. So what I'll be taking you through today is how we're kind of embedding kind of that UKOM endorsed Ipsos Iris data within the different areas of our advertising cycle. Obviously, we have a lot of first-party data at our fingertips, but it's really valuable to be able to pull on this industry-standard data to infuse this within all the different areas of the advertising cycle to provide value to our advertisers and internal commercial teams. So firstly, it's just access to the audience data is fabulous for us. It's seen as holding a lot of weight and gravitas with our senior stakeholders. Every month, I produce reports like this, where I'm looking at how we're stacking up against our competitors. Not only does it show, how we're doing in terms of monthly and daily audience volumes and engagement metrics, but for us, the transparency is key for showing our scale. So being able to look at things like how Facebook, AMP, distributed content, Apple News performs for our sites versus our competitors really helps us to show what we're able to monetize versus the other areas of the industry. Obviously, these are kind of internal collateral documents that we provide to our senior stakeholders every single month. They take it all the way up even to the chairman, and it's what those numbers are reporting on that makes sure that we are providing growth for our industry. Obviously, for the external ones, it makes more prettier documents. We're all about the one-pagers with our sales team. With our sales team, we provide very quick insights using Ipsos Iris data, predominantly using kind of that deduped audience figures, so the kind of unique visitors. We use our first-party data to provide things like the page views and the time spent, because obviously bigger numbers people love. But the really valuable data that we get from Ipsos here is obviously the demographics. So we do have demographics from our internal platforms such as Google Analytics, but frankly, I don't find that terribly reliable. So being able to pull on something like Ipsos Iris is really helpful for us, and we can directly compare those audience stats and those indexes versus our other publishers. We're also doing this kind of at a top line level, so looking at like the Mail Online, Metro.co.uk, but also drilling down into any of the channels that we have tracked within the Ipsos Iris platform. So we have all our main channels tracked, and pretty much 80% of our sub-channels tracked. The editors create so many channels, it's hard for me to keep up. So I would say 80% with a lot of confidence. The interesting thing with Ipsos at the moment, which I'm very happy to say, is that as a team, so the insights team are using Ipsos Iris, daily, weekly basis. The sales team is a slightly different story. Yes, they're using the numbers in their one pages, but they're not going there to pull the runs themselves for like agencies and advertiser briefs. So if they get a brief through that wants to target 18 to 64-year-olds, they'll come to us instead rather than going by the platform. Now, this is just a difference in skill sets for us. The sales teams aren't necessarily built to be using these tools every single day. They've got their own tools that they need to use, like their order forms and their dashboards. So instead, what we've decided to do now is speak their language. Their new language of this year is Power BI. So we now have created reports with Ipsos that automatically update into Power BI for us. So working with our little Ipsos team, we asked them to generate about 15 different demographics. This was meant to be a little visual, but it's just a static now, where I've got 15 different demos on the kind of drop down in the right hand side, and then all my digital platforms that I'm looking at on the left. So I can either look at Emma Member as a whole, or Mail Online, or Metro.co.uk, and it automatically populates all my stats for me. Now, this is not revolutionary, I get that, but what's really helpful for me is these reports are sent to me the day after Ipsos is released, and it automatically then I send it onto a robot, it updates, and this is all updated within 4 seconds and is automatically integrated into the sales tools. So rather than having to go into Ipsos and learn a whole different interface, which for them can be quite a lot, it's the exact same numbers, but in a prettier version, suddenly they're using it on a daily basis. So I would definitely, if you have to take something away, think about how you can showcase the data in a language that really speaks to our sales team or your own sales team, whether it's Power BI or different data viz tools, can really be helpful in kind of developing your usage of Ipsos. Now, for strategic and insight campaign planning, I'm sure if you've gone to like any Ipsos kind of webinars or read their reports before, it's very self-explanatory on what they're able to produce. Obviously, they do beautiful deep dives into different categories and how different events are performing over time. But I thought I would just show kind of two quick examples of how we're using kind of first-party data alongside kind of that industry standard endorsed data to provide insights for our advertisers and editorial teams. So firstly, we kind of got from a commercial perspective, I just randomly chose something. I thought dating apps, that sounds fun. So from a dating apps perspective, if I had a brief that came through from like Thursday or Bumble, my first party data is obviously where I would go first, looking at things like what relevant channels do I have, what kind of site traffic is that delivering, what are those top articles that we can see within that channel, what's generating the most engagement. And then I can go into kind of our DMG ID, which I'll touch on in about 3 slides, and look at what kind of targetable segments I have available, who lives within that segment. We can also use kind of our own first-party tools like a community of readers and our polls to understand kind of what are readers looking for when it comes to dating advice. Are they single? Fun facts like that, as well as looking at kind of how editorial trends change over time. So is there a time of year that we are writing more about dating, and should we be having a specific channel or sponsorship designated to that content? Now, that's all very well and good, but from an overall market perspective, just using first-party data doesn't give me an idea of kind of what's outside of the realm that we, other than what we currently publish. So when I look at kind of Ipsos, I can look at when that entire industry is trending. So, fun fact: dating advice peaks in January and June. If you ever want to have a look at that, you get twice the amount of page views in January and June than any other time for dating advice, as of Ipsos's data. But not only that, Thursday to Saturday, that's top content, guys. Especially Thursdays, more page views on Thursday on dating advice. Probably why it's called Thursday.com actually. And also we can look into demographics here, so we can see kind of who is that content appealing to more. So I was looking at this audience and it was saying it was more likely to be kind of slightly skewing female, but more likely 18 to 34. So those kind of things means I can go back to the advertiser and say, actually, we know that content is peaking between Thursday and Saturday. I suggest we do a channel takeover on our dating channels between Thursday and Saturday, as we know that's when people are looking for that dating advice. Our own first party data says they're more likely to be interested in restaurant reviews and top tips, etc. And that can help inform our content or partnership strategies. Now, obviously, as an insight team, we are predominantly commercial, but over the last, I would say, 6 to 12 months, we've been feeding into editorial more than ever. Not only from a Mail Online and Daily Mail perspective are our commercial and editorial teams collaborating a lot more on projects, but our Metro.co.uk team and Metro teams, in terms of editorial especially, are already merged, which means that they're kind of leaning on us to provide not only the kind of commercial perspective of insight, but also editorial as well. Especially as kind of Metro merged recently, what their kind of main thing they're coming to us is like, what content do our readers enjoy? What should we write more about? What channels could we produce? Now, that's a really interesting question for us, because I can look into the data and see in Google Analytics, what are my top channels? What has the highest kind of increase over the last 12 months? When are they trending, etc. But it doesn't give me a perspective on what's outside of that. For example, like gambling. We don't have a gambling channel, but actually our readers are super interested in gambling. So is that something we should be looking into, providing kind of sport betting insight? Don't know whether it's legal, just provide the insight. Or whether people are interested in food and drink. Now, food and drink for me was a really interesting thing to come out of here, which is when I look at like kind of Ipsos, I can see where our users are high users of different categories. Have you guys used the heavy users before? I would recommend it. So basically Ipsos gets all your different categories and then ranks the heavy, medium and light users. And I can go Mail Online readers against all heavy users categories, where are they more likely to be spending time than others? And we actually see that they have a really high usage of like food and drink websites. But on Mail Online, we don't really have a very strong food and drink channel. We write a lot of recipe content, but it's not really housed somewhere. So I went back to the editorial team and said, you know what, there's a really quick win. When I look at the external data, we know they're really interested in food and drink. We could create a fabulous food channel. We could take it to supermarkets and ask them to sponsor it. And that could be a really good way to kind of generate quick revenue. This section for me, I think, is probably not just in the rest of my deck, the most interesting, which is what we're doing in terms of campaign activations and how we're using Ipsos data kind of to fuel our first party data segment strategy. Now, it will probably come on to in a few more slides, but it makes more sense if I start off with what we're doing as a first party data strategy first, and then at the end I'll go into how we're fueling it with Ipsos. So we have DMGID. DMGID launched last October, and that is our proprietary identity solution. What it's aiming to do is to link all our audiences across our entire network. It's completely GDPR compliant, and the idea is it's kind of, in a very much essence, a massive matching table. So if someone goes onto Mail Online, maybe subscribes to a newsletter and gives their email address, and then goes onto one of our marketing platforms such as Mail Plus, and kind of signs into the Daily Mail digital edition there, and has the same email address, it will link those two people up and say, oh, they're the same person, let's append all their learnings and behaviours from Mail Online to that same user over on MyMail. Now, it's doing that not only just based on email addresses, but lots of different identity solutions they're matching across, and we're matching across our entire network. So whether that's Mail Online to iNews to our ventures clients and all our kind of offshoots as well. Now, what's really important to us is kind of isolating what is unique about our data, and we've spent a lot of time working out that kind of USP for us. Now, one of our biggest USPs was the fact that we produce over 150 billion data points every single month. Now, for me, that's a huge, phenomenal number, but it's really hard to put that in context when you don't have any comparisons against it. So with Ipsos, we have about 2 or 3 stats, even on just the kind of what is unique about our data slide here, that come from Ipsos. So we can say stuff like we produce twice the amount of page views than any other publisher in the UK. We account for 41% of time spent out of all publishers in the UK, which means that obviously if you're spending more time and generating more page views, I'm able to learn a lot more about you. And as soon as you're able to put it into context like that, it gives that kind of stats much more gravitas when I'm speaking to agencies and also clients as well. Also, we can say stuff like we're the 8th largest digital organisation in the UK. That stat is from March, but recently 11th. But you know what the sales team are like. Don't like to update if it goes down, but I will update it. From all this kind of 150 billion data points, what we're now trying to do is just work beyond the page view. Traditionally, before the insights team and data merged, the data team were just building segments, frankly, just off the page view. So kind of looking at the article ID, the channel title, maybe if you had semantics involved. So we have admantics or IAS, working out kind of what the context of the page is as well. What we're now trying to do is branch beyond that. What we have done is branch beyond that. So we're looking at things like affiliates. So when people click on affiliate links, so let's say they're reading an article about the top Ninja air fryers of the season, and they click on a link and go to Amazon, straight away you get put in kind of an Amazon lovers audience, but also kind of a home improvement or home appliances in market audience as well. Also pulling in things from surveys and polls. So every survey people enter on site gets fed into DMGID. Every competition you enter as well as things like advertising, so when you see an ad or click on an ad. So we're really trying to branch across our entire portfolio and pull on as many levers as possible to create our kind of what we call mass connections. So mass connections live within my team. They're all the anonymized solutions, so we don't know who those users are. They're completely aggregated cohorts, but we're trying to understand based on the behaviors we observe across the entire network, who they are and what they might be interested in. So what we've done is create 5 different pillars because it makes it much easier to communicate to the sales teams and advertisers. We used to have something called tier 2, tier 3, and there was no tier 1 or tier 4. It was very confusing. So I was like, 5 pillars with pretty colours. Everyone loves it. So firstly, we've got demos. Demos is where we're using Ipsos data, and I'll speak about that in a bit more detail. But as a publisher, we don't actually have any logged in information on our big sites. So Mail Online, Metro.co.uk are two big players. We don't have logged in demos at all. So we have to use different levers to be able to understand who that user is from a demographic perspective. So we actually use survey data and competition data, so that declared data, or some people will now call it zero-party data, as a basis for our demographic data. And then we use Ipsos and also modelling techniques to increase the size of that audience and then revalidate it. I won't spoil that. We've got interest-based data, which is obviously just based on a high frequency of readership within a category. In market is where we're trying to pull on all those different interesting levers. So we're looking at things like people clicking on affiliate links, entering competitions, saying they're in market for a dress, or reading about the top 10 dresses of the season. We've got about 7 to 8 different types of levers will go into our in-market segments. Obviously, context is key at the moment. We're seeing a slight shift back to context now as an advertising strategy, as we've got about 1,000 of those segments. And then we've got geotargeting. I won't dwell too much on geotargeting, but I will say that I love geotargeting. Geotargeting, I think, is going to make a big comeback in the next 12 months. And it's just beyond, it should be looked at beyond like looking at cities and districts. Postcode level targeting is fabulous. Looking at over indexing areas for certain attributes is actually giving us kind of increasing CTRs of about 60 to 80%, especially when we look at like affluence or areas which might have access to electric vehicle points. When you build those postcode areas out with high indexes and then target those, you do actually see a much higher CTR on your campaigns. So how are we improving our demographic cohorts with Ipsos Iris? Very happy to share these kind of stats, mainly because I wasn't involved back in the day. So previous male segment was built about 6 years ago. Not sure how they decided this, but if you read sport, finance and automotive content, you're a male. Now, it was a really stereotypical segment to be built. It gave us limited scale. The frequency and content was based on nothing other than Joe, who sat next to them probably. And it didn't include any kind of known demographic data. And most importantly, when I actually looked at that segment, so I sent that segment a survey and asked them to, I think it was very generic, like, do you like Boris Johnson? Just to get them all entering. And I asked them if they're male or female. All I'll say is it didn't skew male. Might have some under-indexed male. Anyway, when we looked at our new male segment, we decided that actually using declared data as a first port of call was very important. But obviously it's not highly scalable for us. So anyone who answered in a survey or competition at least twice saying that their gender was male would go into that cohort. But not only that, we looked at kind of how we could use Ipsos Iris data to understand what areas of our site have a higher frequency of page views or index male, and where they consumed those across the sites. So we spoke to our Ipsos team and they produced a kind of quartile-based report that looks something like this to help me understand the minimum number of page views within a channel or a overall site. So looking at males and females, the average number of page views for that gender, the percentage of page views that they account for within the heavy quartile, and also the percentage of kind of audience or panelists. So if we look at things like iNews here, for example, the kind of minimum number of page views across a month for a male and the female is pretty much exactly the same, but the average number of page views is very different. So anyone who's doing about 13 plus page views is more likely to be male in this instance. Also, kind of 50% of the heavy audience were more likely, with page views were male as well. So we knew that not only they're consuming more page views, but they're more likely to be in that kind of heavy cohort as well. Especially we could do this at kind of a top line level, but we also did this at a lower kind of sub-channel and channel level as well, trying to isolate those channels not only skew towards male, but have a higher frequency of page views and work out what that number is as well, which means we could feed permittive, which is our DMP, with those rules. So I would say, for example, anyone who's entered a survey at least twice and said they're male, or had 13 plus page views in the last 30 days, or had 10 plus page views on Metro.co.uk Sport are more likely to be male. And we generated our new segment. Now, what we found was when I resurveyed that audience again with that exact same kind of, I think it was Boris Johnson survey, we found that actually 70% of that audience were male. So they were 49% more likely than the average audience to be male. I'm under no illusion that that segment will ever be 100%. We don't have logged in demos. And kind of, as Ian said, even if you have logged in demos, you can't prove it's 100% male ever. What we did find though is like we can't see any significant increase in segment scale at the moment. So my next step will be to model out this audience and see if I can, if by using a model, whether I can still keep that 70% male, but also increase that scalability. Things to kind of think about of what else we're going to kind of look to do the same process with Ipsos Iris data is how to build kind of bespoke in-market audiences using kind of the purchasing signals that Ipsos provides. So obviously Ipsos is getting a stream of URL level data. So there is a project that could go on, I said could, might be, that we could look at URL level data and say, for example, please can you find all the kind of, let's say, fashion websites with /checkout, tell me kind of who they're more likely to be and where we can find them on our site, and then pass that data through to us for targeting. We're also looking at how we can create bespoke advertiser audiences within Ipsos as well, looking at like kind of what URLs they're more likely to be on and pass that through again to our DMP for targeting. Lastly, when we think about kind of the advertising cycle, is providing post-campaign analysis. So within our data management platform, we're always providing PCAs, looking at kind of who the people who interacted with the advertising, their demographics, what interests they have, what celebrities they like, what events they're interested in as well. But also we can kind of look externally to sources like Ipsos to see if we can see any trends here. So this is a recent Paramount Plus campaign. This was ran on the 7th of July. What they booked was just a one-day takeover of the TV Showbiz channel, as well as a takeover of Metro.co.uk ends. So what we were looking at here is, because they owned that channel solely on that day, is could we see any increase in traffic to their site as a result of our advertising? Obviously, this relies on the fact that they don't do any other advertising that day, but we could go into Ipsos and see a lovely trend. So in this case, I just went into the daily dashboard, which, oh gosh, Ian, is it available 72 hours after?
It is. No, less than that.
Less than that?
36.
36, perfect. So I can go in there basically a few days after the takeover has run and provide really quick insight and go in and type in Paramount Plus's URL and see over the last 30 days how that channel has performed, not only for audience but things like time spent and page views. So here we can see a lovely little yellow peak on the 7th of July when we ran our takeover. The good thing about this as well is that it automatically tells me at the bottom of the screen that kind of the stats. So it tells me day on day, week on week, how that day has performed. So we actually saw a 333% increase in the daily audience to Paramount Plus on the day of the takeover. Obviously, sites can change depending on the day, so I prefer looking at things like week on week. So we kind of reduce that bias on the day traffic, and we can see it actually had a 220% increase in daily audience to Paramount Plus on the day of our takeover. What's really nice though is I love looking at engagement stats. Like, they might have gone to the site, but obviously we all know that people click and bounce. So I was looking at, were they kind of spending any more time? So we actually saw a kind of 67% increase in time spent week on week to the site when they were advertising with us as well. And within the daily dashboard, we can look at little different drop downs to look at kind of demographics to see whether that increase was coming from males or females. But what we found was actually, generally speaking, to Paramount Plus, they skew slightly male. About 61% of that audience is male. But on the day of our takeover, it actually flipped to 50-50. So they actually saw a much higher increase in females coming to their site. So my short summary is that obviously first-party data is incredibly valuable, but looking elsewhere to that kind of endorsed data helps us provide gravitas to our stakeholders, but also helps us to look at our planning cycle in a slightly different way. I would always say with the Ipsos data to look beyond the reports that are provided and think about how you can use the data in different ways to help enhance your understanding and activation of your audiences, kind of like throughout the advertising process, because there's a lot of value to be had in there. And that's me done.
So thanks, guys. That was really, really insightful. I hope, again, everyone found that as insightful as I did. I'm going to take a few questions from the audience. So have a think of some questions. But while you're thinking, I'll just have a few of my own questions because I get the chance of being chair. So, I mean, it sounds from the way that you guys have been speaking that, Ipsos Iris, while it's not, necessarily going to replace first-party data in any way, shape or form, it's there, it can validate. What have been some of the challenges around? We talked very much on the positives. Have there been any challenges around using it, or any concerns around using it, or any issues that, had you known previously you'd have tried to fix, and how you've adopted it or implemented it?
The challenges of built. The challenges for Ipsos of building proposition that covers the breadth and the depth at the same time of online media is astronomical. The challenges are great. Every time you think you've solved for a problem, something out of your control has changed. When UKOM started, we were only measuring text websites on PCs, and those websites contained text and static pictures. Now we are asking Ipsos to measure text and static pictures and video and audio on websites and on apps, and on those apps on tablet and on iOS and Android, and every new Apple update throws a new challenge for how things have to be measured. So this thing about being future ready, Ipsos will never measure everything perfectly, and it's trying to build the balance between flexibility, balancing the pragmatism of what we're trying to do versus the idealism of giving everybody the perfect granular measurement. So the challenges are endless. And with organisations like Mail Metro, and we have News UK, and we have ESI, and the Telegraph and Guardian on our tech and commercial boards, we're always trying to get the balance right between this data has to be robust. You'd love it to be more granular, but there comes a point where granularity, you lose the robustness. So always trying to get that balance, as I say, across multiple platforms and multiple segmentations.
And what about using it? Have there been any challenges with using it?
Getting the sales team to use it. With any software, I spent hours training them on it, and they're like, yep, great, love it, sounds amazing. And it doesn't matter how many times you come in or showcase like the new Ipsos travel data, they'll go away and they'll just won't use it themselves. They'll always ask us. And we're a small team, so we really try and help them do kind of self-serve. So the challenge for us was working out how to speak their language, which is why we just developed that. That's just iteration one of what we hope will be the best thing ever, of just trying to speak their language of a different tool. So when I actually spoke to them and said, why aren't you using Ipsos? And they're like, it's not to do with the data. It's just a different software, and I don't have time to learn a new software. And there's buttons. And you're like, yes, software. And as soon as you put that exact same data in a Power BI dashboard with 2 drop-downs, happy days.
Do you know what, I'm speaking on behalf of Ipsos here, because we govern what they do, that they actually go and do it. But a lot of the feedback we have is from agencies and publishers. We've got lots of dashboards, and actually another dashboard, while the data in there is fascinating, there's some really good insight in there, you have to dive deep. And Ipsos are being asked more and more to provide the data straight to APIs for other for people's own tools. And that's a big focus of what they're trying to do, make the data usable within other APIs that people already use.
Does anyone have any questions? Oh, at the back.
Got 2 actually. One for you, Ian. When you were listing off the agency groups, you missed one fairly big one out. I don't know if that was a mistake or whether there are some big agencies that don't subscribe. And then my question for Sam was, how often do you get to present that insight to agencies and clients? Are you reliant on sales teams instead of data?
So you're right. We have WPP and Omnicom don't subscribe currently. They are continually in ongoing conversations about a subscription. But part of the conversations is exactly what I've just said about integrating the data directly into the systems and the processes that they already use. It's a challenge, because when we made the change from the previous supplier, the reason we made the change to Ipsos, and this was 3 years ago now, was we thought it was better. And we were meeting the market demand for something that was built for the UK. I mean, I did notice you had a challenge up there that was Ipsos Iris is only actually live currently in the UK and Australia. And the previous supplier had a global solution that agencies subscribed to. One of the challenges with a global solution is you don't get to make that many changes to it to suit your own market's demand. And the clue's in our title. It's UK online measurement. So somebody building something specifically to meet UK requirements meant investment, and it meant building something that was more user friendly and therefore more expensive. It's a challenge continually to get people to invest in this. I hope that clients beginning to ask questions of their agencies and saying, exactly how are you doing your online planning? What data are you using? How robust is the data you're using? You've got some very smart proprietary data sets that I'm sure are very good, but where's the objectivity and where's the scrutiny? And that's part of the process. And more clients are now looking both in the weeds of the detail of the activation that can very easily be measured, but also saying, just go back to the start of the process. How have you made your selection of partners here? And show me some industry standard insight that has been the foundation of your plan. So we haven't given up on the other agencies yet, and it's ongoing.
I'll take my second half. So I would say it's two-pronged approach to how often we're using it. So there's top line and depth. Top line, absolutely, they're using it every day, and that's from a sales team perspective. So we have sales decks, especially for our digital and print agency hubs. And within that includes at least 3 slides that also are in our kind of internal stakeholder deck that look at where we rank in terms of daily and monthly reach, but also, for importantly, the story for us and our USP is about engagement, time spent, page views, and all that data is also included in the kind of top line sales decks and our kind of average dwell time. And the sales team know those off by heart. They just expect the numbers to change just fractionally month on month. So I'm all happy with that. The depth of the kind of the insights that we're pulling as a team, I wouldn't say is presented daily, maybe bi-weekly. So we've obviously as a team produce reports on categories. So we look at how kind of supermarkets might be performing in the kind of cost of living crisis, and that's part of our big series called The Big Squeeze. And within that, it's mostly powered by kind of first-party data first. So that's kind of looking at our community data and asking our community of readers about supermarkets and shopping habits. But normally we'll get backed up in the end 2 slides. We always have stuff like why Mail or Metro Media. And that's the important bit for us, is why people should advertise with us, not only owning our insights from our sales from our first-party data, but how we stack up against our competitors. Because if people look to us for insights on the UK, but it's also important to us that we are a sales house. So we have to say why we're better than, or why we're preferred over maybe like News or Reach, or even the TVs.
Perfect, thanks guys.
Can I ask Sammy a question?
Of course you can.
No.
What percentage of your time in research and insight is spent from a sales perspective, going externally, and what percentage is from an editorial, internal perspective that feeds back to editorial to help them? Do you make a very clear distinction between the insights you're delivering?
About 3 years ago, 100% commercial. But then as we had a change of head of department, so we've now got Luke, we've seen that change. And what we found is as we become quite a, not loud, but quite a collaborative team, we get out and we go and speak to the editorial teams. We've changed locations as well. We've got to meet them more. And as we meet them more, they go, oh, I didn't know you had that. And then we've got to provide more insights to them. So I would say now it's more 70-30, but we're also more aware of their needs. So, for example, we did a piece of research on beauty and fashion last week, and we sent it out to our floor about the kind of latest kind of how impact of cost of living on beauty and fashion. But then we also were like, oh, we've met the people from You Magazine last week, and we sent it to them. And they're like, this is amazing, didn't know you had this. So it's actually kind of opening up those lines of communications and knowing that we're here and what we can provide. So it's definitely opening up, but we're not saying that we're the insight team for the editorial team, because that's, unless they give us more resource, then we would be.
Perfect. Well, I think we are time for a break. But I'm sure if you've got any other questions, Sammy and Ian would be happy to answer them in the break. But thanks very much, and enjoy your teas and coffees.